Hey everybody, welcome to Monday, best night of the week. You know what that means? It's time for this week's episode of RfRx, your prescription for coping. I'm Kara, I'll be your host, and I have with me this evening two of your favorite returning co-hosts, Helen and Rob. Helen and Rob, how are y'all doing this evening?
I'm awesome. It's co-host threesome night.
Yes, it
So
is.
it's going to be a good
This may be
time.
first. This may be a first. I'm really
I
glad
don't
we're
think
doing it
we've
this way.
done one, all three of us together, so it should be a
Oh.
good time. So,
I'm
because
pretty
we were very
excited about it.
excited for the guest tonight, so it had to be a threesome.
Yes.
Yes. I think we've done this one other time, didn't we? When everybody wanted to do the show and we just decided we were all going to be here because nobody wanted to miss it.
Don't remember that one.
I don't either.
Uh,
So someone can correct us in the notes if they were here and remember. But that's okay. It will be an episode to remember because we're super excited about it. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, Rob. Do you want to introduce the guest for this evening?
I can do that. With my pleasure to do that. So Mark Edward is an American mentalist and author with extensive involvement in the skeptical movement. He's worked to expose TV psychic mediums like Sylvia Brown, John Edward, no relation to himself, and TV's seatbelt psychic Thomas John. Mark was a steering member of CFI's Independent Investigations Group, which evaluates applicants who claim paranormal powers and hope to win their $500,000 prize. Mark has written books on mentalism, seance theory, and production, including Psychic Blues, where he discusses working as a psychic for the famous Psychic Friends Network. Mark has appeared on television as both primary consultant and on-air performer in such diverse programs as ABC's The Con, A&E's biography Houdini, The Great Escape, NBC's The Other Side, and Psychic Secrets Revealed, and the Sci-Fi Channel Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, and Penn and Teller's Bullshit in 2022. Mark was elected a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. Welcome to RfRx, Mark.
Hey, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited to have you. As we mentioned earlier, we were so excited that the three of us insisted that we all wanted to co-host and be here and talk with you. So thank you for
so happy.
joining us.
Well, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
We have
Yeah.
had tons of people who investigate all sorts of things, but nobody who can give the inside story on this particular topic like you could. So I'm really looking forward to being able to hear about your experiences in this regard.
Fantastic.
So,
And
Let's
so you were
go.
a magician and a mentalist. For people who may not know what that means, everyone pretty much knows what a magician is, but like, what's the difference? What's a mentalist do?
Well, you said were, I still am.
Yeah.
But didn't you say were? The main difference is a magician is, I don't know, pulls rabbits out of a hat or changes a handkerchief from red to green. A mentalist uses the five senses to create the illusion of a sixth. So it's more of a character. You have a character that is pretty professorial and seems to know things. So it's kind of a leap from going from standard magic with all the terrible one-liners and goofy stuff that magicians do to being a little more. I always thought of it as being a little more adult, a little more mature. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. These days, who knows?
So do you do, or did you used to do the other kind of stage magic and don't do it anymore?
Oh yeah, I started doing magic. My grandfather was a magician, so I was inculcated at a very young age, around 5 or 6, into magic and learning how to understand misdirection. So yeah, I started at the Magic Castle in Hollywood in 1975, and I'm still working up there, and not as often. And for a while, I actually levitated my dog, which was a beautiful border collie named Jim.
now, are we allowed to ask how you did that?
No, you can ask, but I won't tell you.
Okay.
Like,
I should have
okay.
phrased that better.
So part
Okay.
part of what you've done and still do, because I remember seeing recent Facebook posts about this, is you do seances. Tell us about.
Yes. Well, for many years I did standard magic. And then I was lucky to run into some really good teachers who convinced me to go in the direction. This is at the time when Uri Geller was just starting to hit on the scene, and a lot of magicians were quite confused by the way he was able to bend silverware. And a lot of scientists we heard uh, were confused by him, and it was a sea change in magic. And I liked that because it wasn't the usual magic at all. It wasn't the usual mentalism either. It was a person who was saying he could do paranormal things. So I went in that direction, and I found that it was very popular. And then I got asked to be one of the mediums at the seance room at the Houdini Castle. I mean, the Houdini seance room at the Magic Castle. They have a room that is dedicated to Harry Houdini, and a group of 12 people come in, and I'm the 13th guest, and I perform a seance for Houdini. And as I did that, I did it off and on for 14 years, and I realized that people really liked it. They also liked the idea that a medium could do things like read their palms or read their cards or whatever. So I started drifting in that direction, and I never looked back.
So that is that a typical thing? Because the TV mediums don't ever seem to do anything other than I hear somebody talking from the afterlife with the name of the J. I don't see them doing tarot cards or things like that. Is that something in live magic that is done often? They mix that.
No, but you have to remember the Houdini seance room at the Magic Castle is a representation of a Victorian seance, with tambourines and the heavily draped velvet windows, and it's a glimpse of the past. And in the past, all those skills were expected of a medium because you were using that to help draw the sitters into your web. And I learned really fast that, if I said I didn't know how to do those things, people would look at me like, oh, you're just a trickster. And that was the last thing I wanted them to think. So I took it upon myself to start learning what I felt was expected of me. And of course, it's not expected of the psychics that are on the stage now because they're using, they're using hot reads off of Facebook and all sorts of the new era of getting information on people. So the old ways, which was to give them a reading of some kind, was how you kind of got your foot in the door and know who was going to believe and who was going to be a skeptic, that kind of thing.
Now, for people who don't know, can you tell us what is the difference between a hot read versus a cold read or some other kind
Sure.
of reading?
Well, a cold reading is basically meeting someone for the first time, not knowing a thing about them, but being able to convince them in a very short time that you know everything about them, and you're just some kind of psychic, you know?
Kind of like when you told us in the pre-show that it seemed like this was a group that was going to bring up sex a lot.
Yes, I did. So in other words, you learn to make bold statements as if they're facts, and you don't say I think or I guess. You just say it. So that's a cold read, and you can get very good at it because you're looking at the reaction of the other person or persons, and that's what helps you course correct or guide your comments in the right direction. And most people don't even know they're giving you signs, and they're called tells in gambling. Uh, so that's a cold read. A hot read is when you go out beforehand and you gather information on a person or persons, and then you make notes and you study them and you memorize them, and then at the right time in an audience, which is what they do today, they say, oh, why am I getting baby clothes? I'm seeing a lot of baby clothes. And the person says, oh my God, I just put pictures of baby clothes up on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's how it works, folks. So all of us are always in a hurry to put all of our information up, everything. We don't think about it, but you can mine that information and you can make a pretty big dent in somebody's consciousness by playing it back as if you're receiving it from a higher power, which you're not. You're just reading off notes that you have like right over here.
I think I recall you saying something at one point about there used to be, or maybe still is, a method where people in the industry share information on clients with others.
Yes, yes.
So
Well,
how
that
does
was
that work?
back in the 30s and the 40s and 50s, where a lot of the little psychic shops that you see on the street nowadays, they were all working together, and they had what was called the ash room. And the ash room is where everybody in a community would fill out like little index cards and put them, in these catalogs of different communities. So if one psychic said, "Hey, I just read for, Lucy Jones, what do you got on her?" And they'd go in there, they'd look up Lucy Jones, and there would be already plenty of information for the new psychic to go ahead and use. Not exactly, again, not a too perfect thing, but it allowed them to share information. That doesn't happen now because it doesn't need to. Everything is right there on the internet. You don't need to, and then the history of that name is interesting because it became called the ash room, like ashram, because when the cops would come and bust these places, they'd burn them down. So there'd be only things that were only ashes left. So
Oh, no.
that's where that comes from.
Oh, wow. So there's several different kinds of readings that I see people getting. There's the private thing where you're one-on-one with a person. There is a kind that happens in a big audience. And now there are the kind also which happen on Zoom. There's actually people that surprises me, by the way. Like, especially with mediums. It used to be you had to be in this dark room and having a seance to contact a dead person. Now you can do it over Zoom from around the planet. Like,
And now they make 100 times the money because they don't
oh,
even have to leave their house.
wow. So what are the differences about, like, say, all right, so say as opposed to a private one-on-one where you can do a cold reading with somebody, you're in
Yeah.
a big studio audience and you're just, does anyone here have somebody who died with a J in their name? Like, what are the differences in that kind of a situation to how well a medium or psychic can do?
Differences as opposed to what do you mean a
Well,
difference?
is it easier to do it in a big room like that to get, hits and get people to agree to it
No,
than a one-on-one?
no. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we're in the midst of the golden age of the con because of COVID. A lot of people like Teresa Caputo, who used to work huge arena rooms with 300 or 400 people, and she would have her minions maybe do 4 or 5 uh, hot reads for her, and she'd go out in the audience and deliver them. Since COVID, they had to shut all that down, and they discovered Zoom. And with Zoom, as you can see, you're looking right at the screen right now, and you can see in the lower left corner, everybody's name is right there, right? So all I need to be successful on a Zoom reading is to have another screen, say right over here, and I just pick a name which is somewhat unusual. I wouldn't pick something like, John Doe or something. I pick a name that's unusual. I Google it, or I would put it in Facebook, and suddenly I've got enough information. All I have to do is do something like this and look over that way, and I've got what I need. Oh, I'm seeing a big bowl of cherries,
Mm,
whatever it may be.
mm.
It's acting.
Oh,
And I think we should,
I could even do that. I'll pick a really weird name, Richard Saunders. I'm seeing
yeah,
something from
exactly. Richard, I
Australia,
see Richard. Hi,
maybe.
Richard.
Podcasts. He likes to talk a lot. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, but
And
see that
Oh,
stuff,
he's
that
nodding in
stuff that's,
agreement. Wow, you nailed it, Rob.
He really
yeah, I
likes
mean,
California too. I can feel the vibes.
So it's a I don't like to call it a skill. I just call it a method or a technique. And it's gotten to be pretty popular with the mediums that we go after, because now what we do is we feed them false Facebook and email information, and then we set them up to sting them so that they actually, we double blind it. So certain people don't know about it, certain do. And they end up taking the bait. And then we wait. We never say, hey, aha, we caught you. We wait, we write it up, we send it to maybe Skeptical Inquirer, and then we spill the beans on them. So it's pretty exciting because Susan Gerbic is, she's getting really good at this. Thankfully, she's on our side, because if she
Yeah.
wasn't, she would be, she knows where all the obituary websites are and where all the newspaper websites, and that's all you have to have is access to information, and you can be the most powerful medium on the planet.
I'm actually getting the presence that there's a Susan Gerbic sort of near you somewhere, someone very
Yeah, she's
close.
right in the next room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know when I thought I had powers, that I was able, I did tarot.
You
and
do
thought I was
have
gonna-
powers.
I do. I have all the power. And the thing is, though, once I look back on it, people will offer up information to you because they're already primed to think it's real.
Oh,
So
yeah.
your job is super easy. Like, you just have to get a couple hits, and then they start offering up information, and then it's a lot of inference.
If you're sociable and you can say what you say with sincerity, then you can do, they'll tell you their whole life story.
Oh yeah.
And then you pick and choose what you want to focus on by the reactions that they're giving you. If you're lucky or unlucky enough to be doing a private reading, you can look at that person and you can see how they are reacting. And it's fascinating. I love it. I love the techniques and I love the artifice of what this is all about. But what I don't like is when people take advantage of, somebody's got a missing or murdered child or something like that. That's not entertainment to me.
Yeah, that was always my issue, because once I saw grief vampires and people that are just they haven't got
that. I thought of that term.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know that's why I brought it up. I knew that.
Yeah.
But
we have now on RfRx had the person who invented Gish Gallop and grief vampires.
Yeah.
There you
go.
Right.
And we have an episode with Susan Gerbic, which is called Grief Vampires. So check out that former episode.
So what were you going to say, Helen?
That was because I did it kind of for fun. I didn't pretend to, I basically, it was like a personality reading, basically.
Right.
It was because I thought that you can't really talk to the dead, and how would any way this? I was reading people's energy.
Yeah, but what I want to say is, even though it was just all in fun for you, it probably wasn't for a lot of the people who sat down with you. So that's why there's a responsibility. If you're going to do readings, let me tell you, that's why I wrote my book, Psychic Blues, is because there's a blues side of it for both the reader and the sitter, which you can't even imagine until you find yourself almost unable to get out of it. I was at one party once. There's a chapter in my book. It's called Ladies' Night, where I was at a Christmas party. It was all women, and they would not let me leave. They said, "Did you read everybody?" I said, "No, you paid me for 4 hours. It's been 4 hours. I have to go." They said, "Oh no, you didn't read everybody. You have to stay." And they blocked the doorway. So I mean,
held you hostage.
You have to stay. They thought by throwing money at me, I would stay. But finally,
they didn't want to pay you anymore.
Oh, they wanted to pay me, but you try sitting in one place for 4 hours talking to people who've been drinking apple martinis all night. So I finally appealed to their maternal instincts, and I said, I have a baby at home I need to get home to. And then they just went, oh, well, that's the situation. So, I mean, it becomes abusive. You can get abused by people who think that you're some sort of ascetic. You know, you don't eat, you don't need to go to the bathroom, you don't need to stretch your legs. You're just like a fortune telling machine. They pull the lever and you just spit out wisdom.
Do you
It's
think,
terrible.
Mark, do you think that speaks a little bit to the desperation of the people that may be seeking these kind of services, that they have
Yes,
almost no place else to turn?
absolutely. I mean, it's yeah, because they don't, people have a hard time trusting anybody these days because lying has become an accepted business practice. All we have to do is look around at what's going on. And so they don't trust maybe they used to go to a priest, they don't trust their own families, they have nobody to talk to, so they'll place their faith into somebody who seems to be able to know things. But it's sad, but I did it because I wanted to get to the top of the pile. I wanted to reach as high as I could go. And then when I reached that level, I said, that's it. I got enough information to write my book. Now I
Mm-hmm.
want out. And it was not easy to get out of it because by then I had a lot of private readings, which I will never do again, by the way. And it was scary. There were some scary people out there.
Ooh, I believe it. Now, were
Yeah.
you ever tempted once you got very skilled at this, or once you got very good at the techniques? I liked that you made that distinction between the term skill versus technique. But
Yeah.
once you found that you were able to use these techniques very effectively, were you ever tempted to continue doing it because you
No,
might be able to make a better living that way than
no.
exposing it?
If
No.
I had decided that, I'd be a millionaire right now and I wouldn't be talking to you.
And we're really glad that it didn't go that way, because
I mean,
this would
because
be a very
look,
boring episode for
Say
what
I
we
had
did
what?
if you weren't
I
here.
had to get up in the morning and look at myself in the mirror every morning. And my background is in magic. I know a cheat when I see it, and I know how to manipulate with misdirection and everything else. So it went against my core being to even play the game. But I did it because there was nothing else going on except magic, and magic wasn't enough. I really wanted to find out how these businesses operate, what it is they're able to do, and how they're able to do it. And along the way, I met a lot of people who were quite interesting, but they were all frauds. And it took me a while to get to the point where I had a relationship with them. At first they didn't want to talk to me, and then as they saw I could do a decent reading, then they listened to me for a little bit, and then they would wink, wink, and nod, nod, meaning you're one of us now. It's like being in the carnival, you know. In the carnival, if you are somebody who's on the inside track and know how to all the carnival games work, you say you're with it. Like if you go by the front of the carnival stall and the guy starts doing his spiel and you just say with it and they just leave you alone. So it was that sort of thing. And it took a while to get there. You can't just go to a psychic and say, show me how you do this. They don't want to share any of that. So I had to ingratiate myself with some of the most despicable people you can imagine.
Yeah, that must have
Uh,
been really difficult to do after a while, especially once you realize that this is all of these people that you're meeting. Was it hard also to continue in this plan after you found out all these people that you're building sort of business and professional ties with and networking with, knowing that they're all con artists? Was that difficult, or were you
no,
already kind
it
of thinking in the
wasn't
back of your
hard.
head what
It
the end
wasn't
goal
hard
was?
because 95% of the people who I was involved with, they didn't want to pay. They owed me money. Sometimes I waited for uh, a year to get paid, practically nothing, because these people were such con artists. So it was not, it was, no, it wasn't hard to leave it behind. The only thing that was hard to leave it behind was being able to have this kind of relationship with people who really needed someone to talk to. I still miss that. I miss the idea that, I'm the all-knowing, all-seeing eye that knows everything except how to run my own life. It's fascinating to see how high and how low you can go at the same time. But when I decided I had had enough, I really did make a break and said, now write about it. Now get more involved in the skeptic movement. Share your ideas with the skeptic movement, although I found resistance from the skeptic movement as well at some points. But then again, there was nowhere else to hide now. I for many years I was faced with people telling me, you need to make up your mind. Which side are you on? And I would say, I don't have to make up my mind. I can do whatever I want. But it got harder and harder to play both sides of the field. And yeah, it was painful. But it wasn't painful because of the money. It was painful because it was part of my life, you know.
You told me once that you really related to the movie Nightmare Alley because
Oh yeah.
you want to tell people generally what that film's about?
Well, Nightmare Alley was a movie I saw many, many years ago, probably when I was in my late teens, early 20s. The original movie was with, what's his name? How could I forget that? Anyway, it's a movie about a carnival performer who starts out as a mentalist and he goes all the way to the top and then he goes all the way to the bottom at the end of the movie. Guillermo del Toro just made a remake of it, which I highly recommend seeing.
Mhm.
You said my three
Because-
favorite words.
There it is.
I'm gonna have to watch it now.
The Del Toro version is much closer to the original story
Ah.
and it's much darker. I like them both. I like the old version, 1947, and I like the new version. But what would happen with me is, and I think we broached this subject sort of, is, what would happen when I started to really believe in myself? What would happen when I started to get testimonial letters from people and they would say, you are a son of God, you are gifted, you're a God man, thank you, bless you, thank you. It can turn your head a little bit, and it did happen to me. That's when I would watch Nightmare Alley again. I'd sit down in front of the TV and I'd get my old beta tape out of Nightmare Alley and I'd put it on and I'd pour myself a drink and I'd watch that movie and I'd say, you're not going to go that way.
Mm.
And it really helped me. And when Randy, the amazing Randy, wrote the intro to my book, Psychic Blues, he compared Psychic Blues to Nightmare Alley, which for me, that was like one of the greatest commendations I could ever expect from anybody. And I still believe, it should be on the shelf. If you like there's a book called Psychic Mafia by Lamar Keene, and then there's Nightmare Alley, and there's my book, should be right up on there because we're about due for another one, a little more updated, not by me. It's got to be by one of these people if they ever decide to go straight, which is probably not likely, but it could happen. So yeah, that movie changed my life and continues to change my life because it is what you feel in your soul when you are digging at people's pain and you're selling them hope. And when you sell them hope, it takes something away from you as a human being. Because I never got a degree in marriage and family counseling or anything. I just did card tricks, So I didn't know how to handle the guilt that comes with that kind of responsibility. And there was some. And Psychic Blues is now out in an audiobook, which I highly recommend, of course, which I narrated and read.
It was nicer reading it that way because I got to hear you read it to me. So that was nice. Yes.
Yeah. Well, just real quick, the deal with Psychic Blues is I really wanted to get the book produced because I really wanted to get the word out. I didn't care I looked for publishers. Publishers said, I'm sorry, we don't do fiction. And I was like, wait, this isn't fiction. This is what really happened. And finally, I got a publisher, Feral House. Feral House published it, but when they did it, they wanted it to be only the darkest part of what was going on in my life. So they edited about a third of the book out, which didn't make me very happy. But then again, the book got published, so I was ecstatic.
Mhm.
So what I did later is I said, okay, I'm going to revert back to the original manuscript and do an audio book, read it myself, and have some fun with it. And I did. I'm really proud of it. It turned out way better than I thought it would turn out.
Do you like, I don't know, like for me, I've like, since I was involved in that sort of community and, you know, I sold, you know, a number of people some BS, like this is my penance, like pushing against
Yeah.
these ideas to a certain degree, because when you understand how religion works, and this is not much different, which is giving
Yeah.
people false hope in with supernatural things, you know,
Right.
that's, I feel like, you know, when you have that understanding of that,
Yeah.
that there's this feeling of, I need to do better now that I know that this is, you know, all a trick.
Well,
Okay.
I knew I needed to do better as soon as I started seeing people back in the 70s who were doing stand-up psychic readings. I'd see them on TV and I'd go, there's no way. One of the lines Susan and I hear all the time is, there's no way in the world the psychic could know that. And we learned, oh yes, there is. So I don't take it as penance anymore. I've just matured, and the rest of the world just needs to open an ear and at least be aware of what they're getting into. Don't blame
Mhm.
yourself, because if it wasn't you, it'd be somebody else, or a bartender, or you shouldn't feel bad.
Oh, I don't,
You
I
might
like,
have,
I
you
like,
might
I
have
look at my,
actually saved somebody's life. You don't
well,
know.
like, I look at myself like back then to who I am now. Like I also at the time didn't know better. Like I was,
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
gaslighting. I was gaslighting myself.
That's
you know,
right.
you
So,
know,
but you shouldn't live under the guilt, because you're out in the open now, and you are on the side of the good things that are going on. So, just
I
forget
didn't mean
all
that.
of
I didn't
that.
want to make this into a therapy session. I was just,
I know. But that's how
I was feeling the bond.
that's how you learn.
Mhm.
If you don't learn, then what's the point, So
I
anyway.
think Mark's good at what he does.
Yeah.
He's already got Helen opening up and telling
I
her
am, yeah,
secrets.
because I'm very shy.
I see
don't
travel for you in the next couple months.
Oh, wow. This is the second prediction Mark has made.
Travel. Yeah, Helen's going to travel somewhere she's never been to before.
This
Look
is
at her
true.
face.
And
See?
yeah, it is true. So
Now, Mark,
It is
tell
true.
us, full disclosure, Mark, how did you know
Anyway.
that? What made you say that?
I don't know what makes me say it. What makes me do anything that I do, It's just, if somebody wants to believe, they're going to believe. That's all there is to it.
One of my first experiences with Mark was, I think it was my first Psychon, and Mark did a workshop where he was talking about these sorts of things up front, and then he just started to read the people in the workshop, and we're all skeptics, and he was like, yeah, that's right. Oh my God, that's right. Wait, how did he know that about my vacation coming up? It was quite amazing.
Yeah, and then at the end of that, I said, well, here's my cheat sheet, and I held up the sheet that had all of the things that Susan and I looked at on Facebook the day before. And, I blew the gaff, as they say in the carnival business. I showed everybody how easy it is. It's called performance. It is a performance art. It's acting. That's all it is.
Right,
And
but people who do that for a living and tell people it's the real deal, I don't have time to look at Facebook. Why would I do that? That's what they say.
No, they do. Well, the thing of it is, once they reach a certain level of fame, they get a couple TV shows or something like that, they no longer feel it's necessary to do that kind of hard work. It isn't hard work. So they will fall back on just doing cold readings. And if they're on a TV show or something where they feel like they really need to make a dent, they will do a quick hot read.
The other thing
It-
you didn't mention that I've heard you talk about before, so I want you to explain this, is, and I think you witnessed this somewhere,
Excuse me.
I recall, which is the Confederate issue, or repeat people in a room that, like, they don't admit that they've read these people
No, of
before,
course not.
but
Yeah.
it's like the most amazing hits in the audience are from people they actually even know, and maybe it's their student, right? You've seen that.
Yeah. Oh, I've see it all the time. I see it in my own act, actually. But I mean, yeah, good stooge is really hard to find. But once you get your hooks on one, uh, I will ride it for as long as I can. I don't overdo it, and I don't always use it in every single show. But the psychics don't have that problem, the ones that are making all the money, because number one, it's just like faith healers, the people who are sitting down in front in the audience, if there is an audience, okay, that's a pretty big question these days. The people who are down in front are usually people who they've given readings to already, either on the phone or in person, so they already know these people, but they don't come up and say, hey, this is an old friend of mine, shake hands with them and tell the rest of the audience that they know them. No, they just immediately go right to where they left off the last time they spoke with that person. Oh, I'm picking up your grandmother. Yes, she had a rose garden, or whatever they have remembered about that person. So the rest of the audience doesn't know that they've already had a reading. So this is how we busted Rosemary Altea on Penn and Teller's Bullshit, the premiere episode of Penn and Teller's Bullshit, which I'm very proud of, had a woman who, as soon as she arrived at the studio, she started asking people, who do you want to reach? Who do you want to reach? You're supposed to sequester the audience. She's not supposed to have any contact with anybody. So we caught her setting up the whole show beforehand, and then we nailed her afterwards. So they're devious and they're deceptive.
And many people who believe this will point to TV show, like they wouldn't lie on a TV program on the Discovery Channel, or it's on History Channel. Like,
I don't know who would think that, but it's a TV show, it's edited
I've talked to
for
those
number
people.
one.
everybody. It's
Yeah.
yeah, and as you said, it's like that's one thing that you can't even do if you're live in a studio audience. But when you see a show on television, they're only going to show you the good bits, the best
Yeah,
bits that they've edited down from hours and hours and hours.
the editor is the real magician. The editor, who, if they're good at it, they can make the worst mistake into a hit just by jumbling your words around. I mean, it's unbelievable the things we've seen.
So
Well,
I know people
and
are going
that's
to want to hear about probably one of the more famous things that you've talked about, and it's in your book, your stint on the Psychic Friends Network as
Do
behind
we
Helen.
have to?
I mean, Helen's background suggests
That's
that we do
25
have
I
years
to.
am
ago.
listen, I am the trusted psychic. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I know, and I notice you have the banner up in back of you. Aren't you embarrassed to show that in back of you?
No, I'm not. Listen, my
What do you
90s
want to
is
know?
my
Let's get
90s
it over with.
nostalgia loves this. Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
for people who are not quite old enough, what is the Psychic Friends Network, or what was it?
Well, in about 1994, I started seeing these ads on late night television. And I mean late night, like I'd come home from the Magic Castle, I'd get home around 1 or 2, turn the TV on, and there would be, what was her name? The singer. God, I forgot her name.
Dionne Warwick.
Warwick.
I know.
Yeah,
See, I know my
and they'd be
trivia.
talking about our gifted psychics, and I would look at it and I would say, this is bullshit. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. I'm sorry. I would say, no, I can do this.
You can say bullshit on here. It's fine.
Okay, all right. So I would watch those and I would say, if they can do this, and then I found out from some other people who I know who are other fellow mentalists who were, as I would say, making a little extra change on the side by working from home, because back then you were given an extension and you would call in and check in with the board, and they would take your number, and you had an extension number, And then they would put you into the mix, which was like this cyclical Ferris wheel of calls. So you could go, you could work anytime, day or night. You could work all day. You could work half an hour, however much you wanted. And that really appealed to me because I was like, well, number one, I want to learn how to do this because I really didn't have a clue other than tarot cards and palmistry. And number two, there were some advantages to it. And it wasn't the money. I won't even tell you how much I made. It was embarrassing. But they gave you the opportunity to change your skill. In other words, if you wanted to read tarot cards, then you would go into the tarot card, punch that number out, and then they would say your tarot reader is Mark, and here's his extension. If you wanted to do clairvoyance, same thing. But my favorite one was called ghost hunting. This is a long time ago, where they would send me people who had these stories that were so incredible, and they're paying $3.99 a minute to tell me these ghost stories.
Back that long ago, that would be like, I don't know, $15 a minute now. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would be sitting there in front of the fireplace a lot of times, and I'd just be staring into the flames going, wow, this is just, no one will ever believe this if I try and write this out. They just won't believe it, because a lot of times I had people who had no reason to lie to me, and they would start off by getting a general reading. And then when I was done with that, they'd say, oh, you sound like you know what you're doing and you're okay. Now I want to tell you what's really going on. And they tell me some outrageous haunting or ghost story. So I love that, because it was one way to just sit back and listen to tales that were told with heart. I mean, these people were terrified. What do I do? What do I do? And here I am, this guy, nickel and dime mentalist, and I'm supposed to know. They'd say, what's going on? Anyway.
Well, what would you go to for that?
Yeah, what would you tell them if somebody was having a haunting in their home? They thought they had a demon or a ghost.
It was as varied and different as you can imagine. Some people I would say, look, if this happened, there's some of the stories are in the book. I would say, if this happens again, I want you to call me right away, and we'll figure out what's going on. And they never call back again.
Do you think the ghost got them?
Yeah, that's what
I used to do it. I used to do house cleansings. I used to go over to people's houses and cleanse their house of spirits.
Oh,
yeah.
No, you didn't.
I did. I'm going to own it.
You went to their house?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a pagan high priestess, so I had the power of like cleansing somebody's home. So I had notoriety within the pagan. I know. I told you.
But you believed you were really cleansing it, though, right?
I really did thought I was.
All right, so you weren't a con artist.
No, I genuinely felt that I was able to do something, because like my conscience, because that's why
that's all that counts. You don't have to make any excuses. You generally believe you had your sage, you burned it.
Yeah.
It's over.
I told y'all about the time I exorcised a demon out of someone's house, didn't I?
No.
Oh yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, it's not hard to do if you know how to lay it on with a trowel, as we say.
But I assume you believe that, Cara, right?
No, I did not. This was when I was a public servant, and a woman was terrified and wouldn't go in her apartment because she was convinced it had a demon. And she was a single mom, and she had some kids, and she had packed up their whole entire apartment out of and they lived in affordable housing kind of situation. It was not a nice neighborhood, but it was clear that they didn't have any place else to go, and she was in her car with her babies and stuff, and wouldn't go in her house because it had a demon. And she was telling me all about it, and it was obviously haunted because the stove came on by itself, and sometimes there was a draft, and there were creaky noises.
The lights would blink, and
yes.
And
it was all of that, and so I went in with my water bottle of water that I blessed as a notary public, and I had a a New Testament Bible that they had passed out at the precinct to everyone, which I'm pretty sure was illegal, but that's what happened. And I had it in my bag, and I went in her house with my flashlight, my water bottle, and my Bible. And, this was pre-Supernatural days, the TV show. So the only thing I had to draw on was like The Exorcist. So I was just in there going, "The power of Christ compels you," with my Dasani water bottle, spraying it on her stove, and, searched the house, and there was nobody in there, and told her it's
Laura,
safe.
we've been friends for 3 years, and this is the first I've heard this story. This is awesome.
It was pretty fun. I don't know if she was convinced or not, but I assured her that the demon
You were
had,
convinced. That's all that counts.
I mean, I was convinced that it wasn't a demon and that there wasn't one in her house. So I felt very confident when I told her authoritatively that there
were
was
no more
not a
demons
demon
there.
in there anymore.
So you're doing a good deed. Very good.
I hope so. I don't know. Hopefully that didn't convince her that was a real thing or something.
I don't think having a conversation about rational thinking and skepticism would have helped you in that situation.
And I'm proud of myself for realizing that and not arguing with her, okay? But anyway, where were we? I'm sorry, we were talking about the Psychic Friends Network. Let's get back on track
Yeah,
here.
I actually had a question. So when you're an agent for recovering from religion, you get a lot of training to make sure you do it right, you don't harm people, and you tell them all the right things. Did you get any training going on the Psychic Friends
Absolutely none at all.
Network?
But what I had to do is I had to do 3 different auditions. I had to do 3 different readings for 3 of the bigwigs in the company. So again, you got to realize at that point, excuse me, there was probably about 200 or 300 psychics working on the line, and they were making money hand over fist. So they weren't being too particular about who they were taking. They just wanted to know if you could lie convincingly. And coming from a magic background, I sold that lock, stock, and barrel, and got hired on the spot.
Were they openly telling you to tell us if you can show us that you can lie convincingly, or were they expecting you
No,
to pretend you
of
could do it?
course not. They were playing the game of saying, what kind of psychic are you? And I would say, I'm an intuitive clairvoyant. They'd say, oh yes, intuitive clairvoyance. Done. You just have to have the right buzzwords and say the right sort of magical terminology, and suddenly you are different than the average person that says, well, I don't know too much about this tarot stuff. Hang up. They hang up and they go to the next caller.
So they're looking for people who can confidently sell the product, basically.
Yeah, and let me say something about that. One of the reasons why I don't particularly like to get too heavily into the Psychic Friends Network talk and the methods and things that I did back then is because those companies are still around. And the last thing I want to do is inculcate a whole bunch of new people who are going to call in and say, I can do this just as good as he did. And I don't know who's listening or whose daughter or whose son is going to watch this YouTube tape. It's not a great life. And it is fraught with people who want to take you apart, not only the sitters, but the people who own the companies. So it's hard for me to say anything good about it. And that's why I wrote the book, obviously. But, it's not anything. People used to think, oh, psychics, you must be like a limo driver. What a life, eating in the finest motels and sleeping in the best restaurants. It's terrible. It is living a lie. So it appeals to a sociopathic personality, which I probably have a teeny weeny bit of that somewhere in the back of my upbringing. But I'm kicking and screaming to get away from that now because it's over. That era is over. So I hope we can move on now. I don't know how much time we have left, but
yes.
Unless you have a very specific question. Rob, do you have a specific question about 900s?
All right, just one more. My presumption is they trained you to keep people on the line as long as possible. Am I wrong about that?
they didn't have to train us. What they said was, if you want to be kicked up in the Ferris wheel, if you want to get more calls than everybody else who's waiting, you have to hold people for at least 20 minutes to a half an hour.
Wow.
And when you did that, you were put ahead in the line. And believe me, the phone would not stop ringing for 4 or 5 hours. So I tried to convince them, and some of my callers that would call in. My theory on that was, look, if I can answer this person's question in 5 minutes, I'm going to do it. They're going to appreciate me more, and they're going to call back more. So the more they call back, the more money I'm going to make in the long run. I don't need to hold them, because I learned really quick, people can tell when you're just fishing around and you're trying to hold them, and they're like, you're not telling me anything, You just tell them what they want to hear or what they need to hear, and then you let them go. And sooner or later, they'll call back. Oh, I talked to you last week. You were right. So the company was greedy, and this is what eventually brought them down. You don't need to hold people for that long. It's not right. People are not stupid. I mean, yes, there were some stupid people who called and, I need some lotto numbers. And I'd say, okay, sure. Here's some lotto numbers: 10, 12, 22, 44, 36, and 31. And they go, wow, thanks, man. I'm going to send you $1 million as soon as I get it. And I'd say, oh, by the way, I said I would give you lotto numbers. I didn't say they were winning lotto numbers.
Oh my goodness.
Or which state they're in.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it's going to be drawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5 years from now, on March 5th.
There's a phrase that I learned. It's called, give the man who wants something for nothing, nothing for something.
Ooh.
And
Ooh,
I
yeah.
adhered to that, because there's just, it's not that easy. I would tell people, do you think if I knew lotto numbers, I'd be talking to you right now? Why would I do that?
Right.
I love
Because
that you
we
were like
often hear
trying to help them get some critical thinking skills out of this
Yes,
interaction.
I always tried. I did try, and this is true. I don't care what other people say about me or what I did. I tried to inject a note of skepticism in almost every call I had. And that was one of the reasons why I was able to be successful, because people noticed that I was different than the other psychics, and I wasn't an honest psychic, as like an honest liar. But I would tell people, this is all bullshit, don't you? And they'd say, yeah, I figured that. And I'd say, you just need to go to, I'd give them an 800 number, like to a therapist or an AA line, or there was a lot of women who were being beaten up, and I would give them a women's shelter line.
Yeah.
So I would just tell them, this is who you need to talk to, not to me. I didn't care.
And if we were around in the past, you could have pointed them to recovering from religion, but we're not that old.
That's true.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I would actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I appreciate that you mentioned, Mark, too, about how you want to be careful about what you talk about online because of the way that it might influence people in the future. I think that's a really good point that you make. And you said something else that was interesting to me. You mentioned about how your upbringing, may or may not have sent you in the direction of getting involved in this. And I wondered if you would be comfortable talking about if you see any kind of intersection between mentalism, mediumship, psychic work, and religious upbringing or other aspects of upbringing that might kind of come together to make people vulnerable to either getting involved in it as a practitioner or as a consumer.
Well, I can only speak for myself. Like I said, my grandfather was a magician, and he owned a grocery store in Inglewood, California. And whenever my parents would drop me off to be babysat, Grandpa Schaefer would bring out his little cigar box full of magic tricks, and he'd sit me down, and inside it was, those old-fashioned wire puzzles, those things where you have to try and take them apart and put them together. simple little magic tricks, and he would entertain me. So as a kid, I was like, hey, this guy's pretty cool. You know, what he was really teaching me was he was teaching me that when you see something in this hand, what's the other hand doing? You need to train your mind to look at what the other hand's doing. So that was instilled in me at a very young age. So guess what? That is skeptical, critical thinking. So it was brought into my life probably by the time I was 10 or 11 years old. I was buying all this magic stuff. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just was bit by the magic bug. So meanwhile, many years later, I noticed that Grandpa used to have these, I don't know if I should tell this story or not. Grandpa used to have these card games he ran the butcher department, and back behind the butcher counter was a room, and he would have these card games going on back there, right? And I was too young to understand what gambling was, but I knew that every once in a while, Uncle George would come out with a whole bunch of singles, and he'd say, "Go buy yourself a comic book," And I was like, this seems cool, whatever they're doing, So later I asked my grandmother, after my grandfather passed away, because he took magic lessons from a very well-known magician in LA named O'Shaughnessy the Great. And I met O'Shaughnessy, and he was a very awe-inspiring character. So I asked my grandmother eventually, I said, did he learn, there's dealing from the top of the deck, and there's dealing from the bottom, and there's all these things you can learn about a pack of cards. And I said to Grandma, did he learn that from O'Shaughnessy because he wanted to know when he was being cheated, or did he learn it because he wanted to cheat? She never told me the answer to that. So I hate to speak ill of the dead, but I'm inclined to go with the fact that it was a little of each, but it may at certain times been one of the other, depending on who was sitting at that table. So that was kind of a turning point in my life, because I realized you are getting involved with techniques of deception. And if you don't like the way it makes you feel, then you better get out of it, because I was being charmed by magicians left and right. So at the same time, I was brought up a Lutheran, and I had to go through, what do they call that, where you get, I don't even remember what it was called. I didn't like it. I was
like in the Catholic Church's confirmation, where you
devote
your
confirmation.
life. Okay,
I had to go through all this religious training, and the whole time I was thinking about magic and about how this is just some sort of cover up for something else that was really going on, And so religion had a hold on me. So I like to think of myself as having a spiritual side, but it doesn't have anything to do with religion. It's just good and bad. And what the right hand is doing needs to watch what the left hand is doing. So I have had experiences in my life which I can only describe as being spiritual, but I don't know what the hell happened. So I cannot describe it to any specific religion or dogma. I just know that I'm not an atheist. I mean, I would say, and this is a big confession now, so get ready out there. I'm an agnostic bordering on atheism.
Oh, well, that is perfectly
I know
fine.
Rob just said, oh shit.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say that is perfectly fine, because, of course, people with any kind of belief are welcome here. Yeah. But also, many of the people who come and speak are atheists, but I also appreciate, and I'm in a minority here too, sometimes in this crowd, but I appreciate saying I'm agnostic, because to me, that means I'm focusing on saying there are things that I know and things that I don't.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the right answer. I don't know.
In the skeptic movement, that's supposed to be the right answer too. If you don't know, you just say, I don't know. So
Like, I think being intellectually honest is the most important thing. Like, I have had plenty of experiences within the pagan community and outside the pagan community, and when I did, and certain experiences that happened to me that I have no explanation for, but they happened. And sometimes I have confirmation for those things, but I don't know what happened, and I don't want to ascribe something to it. I just go, I don't know.
well,
It was weird. It was really weird.
yeah.
Don't know what it was.
Well, I had one experience happen in my life. I don't want to go into it. It's a whole hour story right there. But it later and it's been following me all these years, and I finally started to do some research on it. And I bought a book and I found out it's called The Oceanic Effect. Has anybody here ever heard of that?
No, now I got to look it up. Now I'm going to go ask the all-knowing God,
Yes.
Google.
It's absolutely incredible. Basically, it's the idea where just for a split second, you feel connected to everything. And then it goes away and you're like, what the hell was that? So it's called oceanic because it's like this ocean just pouring over you. So, and I wasn't high, I wasn't drunk, I was totally sober, happened in like the blink of an eye. So without getting into it, that changed my whole life because it wasn't magical. It didn't say, oh, this is this path you need to take. It was just a realization that something was bigger than I was,
Ooh,
which I really needed to hear at
Sigmund
that point.
Freud. coined
Well,
that
yeah, but there's
term.
also the
Sigmund Freud tore
neuroscience
it
of
apart.
religion. Okay.
Sigmund Freud, there's a book on the oceanic feeling, and it's about the guy who discovered that and his communications with Sigmund Freud. But Sigmund Freud felt that it had to do with being in the womb, of course, and you know.
Yeah, that's why
Check
we
it
don't
out,
use Freud
folks.
anymore.
Check it out because it happens to a lot of people, but people don't know what to make of it, so they just live with it.
The brain is a strange thing. That's all I'll say that we know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we have
moving
time
on.
for one more topic, and you alluded to it before, but didn't go into any detail. We can't go into a lot of detail, but I just want a little bit more on
Sure.
the most recent sting that made the New York Times.
That isn't the most recent, but
Oh, it's the most recent I know about. That's interesting.
you
Okay.
don't know about the onion ring with the kids?
Oh, okay. But I mean, like publicized widely, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that more than just a skeptic community heard about. Yeah, I realize you guys have done a lot of things. So the Thomas John one, who's a famous person who's had numerous TV shows, the Thomas John experience.
He's actually
Seatbelt
only had
Psychic.
2.
Okay, and he also was the house
Seatbelt
show.
Psychic.
Yes, he was the house show at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, like an evening with medium Thomas John, and you and Susan Gerbic arranged a sting where you tell what happened.
Well, Susan and I have been doing this for a while, and we didn't even know who this guy was, but we got wind of him, and we decided to create fake Facebook groups where we had a lot of Susan's minions. She has lots of people all over the world who
Because she runs the internet.
Well, we don't want to say that. That could get us in a lot of trouble.
That's what the UFO people are saying this week.
I know. I love the UFO people are falling over themselves to try and prove that she's a government agent.
Yep. Susan is a disinformation agent.
Thank you,
Susan
UFO people.
Susan is?
Yes. They put it on a Wikipedia page. Disinformation agent.
I love
really
it.
nuts.
Must be true.
So
next time I talk to Susan, I'm going to ask her to take me to her leaders.
She's actually in the chat here today.
I know she is. That's why I'm teasing her.
the secret cabal.
All right. Sorry, Mark. Go on.
Well, so we set this up, and it's very complicated, but the bottom line is we had about 25 people set up fake Facebook accounts, and we loaded them with all sorts of pictures and stories and how they're going to be really excited that we're going to go see Thomas John. And then so Susan and I only knew 2 things. Number one, and these are not true. One is that my father had a heart condition, and I'm worried that I have a heart condition, and I don't know what to do. And her story was that she had a brother who died of pancreatic cancer and wants to reach him. So those were the only two things we knew. But we loaded in all these things about these two people that we wouldn't know. So this was to double blind the information so that if he, during the reading, started telling us things that we didn't know anything about, and they matched up with what's on the Facebook pages, then that would be conclusive evidence that he just went on Facebook and trolled all the information, which is exactly what he did. So I went to the show. He said, I'm picking up somebody who died of pancreatic cancer somewhere over in this area. And Susan like raises her hand. And then we got to play it to the hilt. You know, we both had we had little tissues that were all wadded up. And we were like,
Oh, man.
yes, that's me. You know, and then he starts going off the script, which means he's telling us things that we don't know, and we had to just kind of go along with it. And that became really hilarious. You can see it. It's all on, if you go to About Time, which is Susan's big video catch, you can see the whole thing, which is hilarious because
Also, Thomas John interviewed both of you, and he had really good and right videos and screenshots, and the audio you took of Thomas John.
yeah,
Yeah.
he didn't know shit.
Holy Kool-Aid channel. Yeah.
Yeah, the Holy Kool-Aid channel's got a really good video. But the funniest part was that, you know, here he was like saying, "Who's Buddy?" And I'm going, and I didn't know who Buddy was. And I'm going, I don't know. Susan, do you know who Buddy is? And Thomas John finally says, "He's your dog, man." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, Buddy." You know, I mean, because we didn't know. So there's a lot of those where we had to kind of just nod our heads, but then we would say, "I'm sorry, I'm so upset, I'm just crying." And finally, Thomas John says something like, "Well, get it together, you know, I'm going to move to somebody else, you know." So he sensed something was off, but it didn't do him any good. So we got the goods on him, and then we went to his book signing afterwards. That's a whole other story, but you'll see it all if you watch the Holy Kool-Aid video. And we got this has been a long session to get this done, but we got the New York Times to write it up in their Saturday magazine, which was really a coup because that went out to millions of people, and the phone was ringing off the hook with people. "We want to do a special on you. We want you to do a documentary. Sorry, we can't pay you, but you know."
The astounding thing to me is, okay, New York Times Magazine, tens of millions of readers, certainly all the official people in television and in Las Vegas would have known about this, and yet he still got hired after all of that exposure as the real medium in a Vegas show and got another network's TV show.
Yeah, this is why, to put a cap on this, is that why Susan and I have agreed to no longer do any sort of sting. We have one that sits in wait, like the elf on the shelf, for the right person or persons to come along. We're not going to do this just to satisfy a newspaper. We want media coverage because it's going to cost money, but it's going to break the whole system of mediumship if we are able to do it. So we've agreed that number one, we're not doing any more TV shows where they show both sides. You know, we don't want this, "Well, Mark and Susan do a great job, but what if there really are mediums out there?" You know, not interested. Either do it the way we set it up and follow us very carefully, or we're not interested. So it's been silent. It's like crickets. You know, we've had a couple interesting things happening, I will say, but people don't want the truth. I'm sorry, guys. They want the Bible and the holy water and all.
No, you know, I think you're exactly right. I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about, we had that conversation about how, "Oh, but I saw it on the Discovery Channel or the History Channel or whatever the channel is."
The History Channel. I love that.
Ancient Aliens, Cara. ancient
Right.
aliens.
Right. And it's exactly as you described, Mark. The whole episode will be just a series of, well, but what if this? And then
Yeah.
people talk for a long time, and then someone goes to see if it's there, and they don't find whatever the thing is, and then it's just, but what if it is?
In
And
my
that's the
day,
whole concept.
when I wanted to watch What If, I watched Twilight Zone. But fiction has
Right.
become nonfiction, and that is the rut we are in until something comes forward to make a difference.
Yeah.
And it better
Well,
happen soon, too.
no kidding. And as we're kind of moving towards wrapping up our conversation here, do you have any thoughts or advice for people, even if it's just how to not get taken in by any of these kinds of techniques or tricks or programs?
Well, if you put yourself in a proximity to somebody who's a professional, you're going to get taken in. But if you're forewarned and you have a sense of, it's like common sense has become uncommon sense. Just imagine what it would be like if somebody really could read your thoughts and see the future. And I tell this to people all the time. They would be the most dangerous person on the planet. And it would only take one person out of billions of people, somebody who could move something with their mind or who could tell you who's going to win the race in the next day. All these sort of things that people believe in. Think about it. Just think about common sense. You have money. You're allowed to spend your money on whatever you want. I'm perfectly happy if you want to get a psychic reading. But just remember, and I'm going to leave with this thought. In my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, a lot of people may have other ones, 95%, if you use, what do they call those things? Pie graph?
Venn
95,
diagram?
yeah. 95% of the people who are out there calling themselves psychics or mediums are complete shams and charlatans, and they know it, and they're taking advantage of disadvantaged people. The other 10% or other 5%, I'm sorry, I break it down into two. It would be like 2.5% are deluded. They really think they have a power, and they don't know any better, or they're off their meds, or they're schizophrenic, or there's 100 mental illnesses that could be psychic if you went that way. And then there's the 2.5% that I find the most interesting, which are kind, compassionate, incredibly intuitive people who've been around and who understand human nature and aren't out to give to make a buck. They're just there and they want to help. So there is that 2.5% that's out there. But when you stack that against the 97.2 or 5%, then your odds are not good. You're much better off seeking out a family member who will at least listen to you. But if you're going to go to a psychic, just be careful, because they are trained to get a hook in you. And once they get the hook in, they don't let go till they have to. I'm done.
Great. Well,
I'm also going to suggest to people that if you're dealing with issues of like grief and letting go of bad ideas, you should contact the Secular Therapy Project at seculartherapy.org and talk to a professional that can help you deal with these issues.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent plug, Helen.
I know, that's why I'm here.
Yes,
mental health
is.
advocate.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions from the studio
Yes,
audience?
we're going to move on to questions.
We do have a lot of questions. Oh,
Yes.
Before we go to questions, Mark, where can
Excuse me.
people find you if they want to learn more about you or your book?
Oh, okay. You can go to, I have a fantastic Wikipedia page,
Ooh.
surprisingly enough.
He does have a very good Wikipedia page. It is
And
very
then
good.
I have a website, which is www.themark, M-A-R-K, Edward, EDWARD.com. no S on Edwards.
Look how I
So you'll
had that in
find
the
all my
chat
books
before
Look
you
there.
at
finished
you
saying it.
prepared.
What's that?
I said, look how I had that in the chat before you even finished saying it. It's
You
like
must have known
I'm
I was going to bring it
psychic.
up.
Yes.
Car, you
And
are
there's
the
a lot
Second
of
Friends Network.
there's a lot of good videos on YouTube as well of me performing and doing fun things.
And I hear that if you stick around for the hangout, we might get to watch a YouTube video of something like that.
Yes, I've heard that it's going to be the John Edward protest we did,
It might be.
which is
So
I'm
stick
very
around.
proud
It
of.
must have been some very weird psychic coincidence, but I knew we were going to talk to you today, and I go, let me poke around a little bit more, and I found that. I had never seen it. It was really wonderful. So
Yeah,
yes, we're
it
going to
is.
share that in the hangout after we stop the
I
recording.
love it.
The algorithm
Okay.
knew, Rob. It was the psychic
algorithm
algorithm.
Yes. Okay, well, let's go. Oh, and don't forget to check out Mark's book, Psychic Blues. I'll drop that link again as well. Oh,
Yes,
just-
Rob
the
already did it.
audio book, because the paperback book is going to be going out of print pretty soon. So
Oh.
the audio book is much more comprehensive. It's funnier. It's darker. You'll love it if you like audiobooks.
Do
Is
you
it on
read the
Audible
audio?
or do you have it on other platforms?
Do I have it where?
It's
Is it on Audible or is it
Yes.
on other platforms?
No, it's Audible. Yeah. it's
Okay, so
Audible.
go on Audible, y'all.
You can
Yes.
probably, a lot of times Audible will give it to you for free if you're
It
a
w-
member.
yeah.
You have other stuff going on.
Do you read it?
Yes,
Yes.
I read it.
Oh,
I had
I-
a
All right,
blast.
well, I
I
have
not
a
only
credit
read it,
I can use.
I
I'm
not
getting
only-
it now.
I not only read
I'm
it,
downloading it now.
but we did some nice little music cues and we put in some sound effects just to kind of use as
Almost an
bookmarks.
audio
as
Oh, you
play.
got fancy.
Almost an audio play.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And the guy
I
who's
love
the-
it.
the technician
I am
got
all
really
in.
into it.
Okay,
I have a
well,
credit
like,
to you, so might as well.
Yep. 48 people are downloading that off of Audible as we speak, so that's going to
Really?
be fun. I mean,
Oh,
I'm just
good.
saying we're downloading it. A bunch of other people who are in here with us right now are probably downloading it, so
Good. Well,
there you
that's
go.
probably the best thing that's happened in a couple of days over here. So
Oh.
good.
Well, I'm excited. As I say every week, if we have somebody on who has a book and they have read their own book for Audible, I'm for sure getting it because
Yeah.
there is nothing I like more than listening to a book that's read by the author, because then you really get their feeling in it and their inflection, and they're reading
Yeah,
it the way
well,
they want you to hear it. So I love
I
it.
can- I
have it
can
on my
tell you-
queue
I can
already.
tell
I
you.
just put it in.
There's one of the reasons why I highly recommend it is because I decided I was going to do the audiobook, and with my son, we did a version where I read it, only he used his he's a filmmaker, he used his film equipment to record the audio. So we did the whole book and we took it to Audible and they said, no, there's too much background noise. You got to go into a studio. So,
Oh,
so we went into the studio. So by the second time I read the book, I was so freaking sick of it that there's an attitude in my voice. I don't know if Rob's listened to it, but
Yes.
it really adds to my character because you can tell I'm kind of fed up with
When you're-
myself.
when you're-
And I
when you're-
was.
When your
If
mood
you
is
get
disgusted,
snarky-
you really sound disgusted. Yes.
Yeah, when I'm disgusted.
if you're being snarky, I'm gonna love it.
And the fun part for me was I got to do, since I did all these 900 phone calls and I remembered most of the people who were on the line, I did my own impersonations of their voices and, well, you must be a man of God, all that stuff is hilarious. So it makes it a little lighter than the book because the book, they just wanted the down and dirty dirt and, okay.
Yeah. Let's go to actual Q&A with Mark. And the first question I want to ask is, someone was asking this about the audiobook. When you were doing the recording for the audiobook, did you ever crack up laughing while doing the readings and have to do lots of retakes?
Many times in the first recording, but when it came down to paying for it, and again, it was the second time around for me reading it, I stayed pretty close to the script, and I mean, there were some times when I just couldn't get one word right or something. go over and over and over it. But yeah, there's always that, you know, you can't help it because what I would do, and this is if anybody's thinking about doing an audiobook, is you do it chapter by chapter, and before you go into the studio, read it over before you go in. Even though you think you know it, if you read it right before you go in, you're less likely to get all caught up in it.
Good answer. Rob, would you like to ask one of the questions that we have received for Mark?
Yes, I saw this in the chat and I was going to ask it in real time, but we didn't get there at that point, so I have to ask it now. Someone wants to know, do you, Mark, dismiss the possibility that there could be genuine psychics?
Ooh, I get asked that all the time. I don't dismiss it. I still hope against hope, but after 42 years of digging into all this, I'm pretty convinced that, well, let's put it this way. There might indeed be somebody out there, but they're not going to be doing television shows. They're not going to be standing up in front of people or doing Zoom readings. They're hiding out somewhere. They are, and if they were to be captured, they would be inside a concrete bunker somewhere, and the CIA and Interpol and all these people would be wiring their brains up and trying to figure out what is going on. That's what I really think. I mean, if it's a pretty big if, I don't know. But I tend to think after all the years and working with Randy and working with the IIG and now working with CFI, we would know by now. Science would know, and we don't.
And
So
those things that you mentioned that people might not know. So the independent investigations group.
Independent investigations group was a group I was involved with where I tested people. That was for the Center for Inquiry here or in Los Angeles. And the Center for Inquiry publishes Skeptical Inquirer magazine. So, I mean, I put my best into it, and I think it was very frustrating for me because I was hired on as the magician. You know, I was the one who was supposed to watch for sleight of hand, somebody doing something furtive. And you know what? Over 6 years, never happened because these people believed that they could do these, they could pass these tests. They really believed it, or they did a very convincing job of telling us they believed it. So it was kind of a big waste of my time, but that's what I learned is that, you know, it doesn't mean that there isn't something or something weird out there. We know there's weird stuff out there, but whether it shows itself is a whole other issue. It's too dangerous. You know, it's too dangerous for anybody who had these sort of so-called powers
Right,
to be out walking
that's a good
around.
novel, because if someone actually was, science fiction, born with that capability, yes,
I wrote a script. I wrote a script like that.
Ah,
It was called Legacy, and it was about a homeless guy who was really had the power, but he had to hide out and get
yeah,
away from people
right,
because they just wouldn't leave him alone.
right. As you said, they'd either be experimented on, or at least they'd be hunted for their ability. If the U.S. would try to spy on the Russians and vice
Yes,
versa, there's no way
yes, they'd be
you're sitting in a
torn
corner
in
store,
pieces.
you're giving out psychic readings for $10.
I mean, have you watched Firestarter?
No.
Which is
Yeah,
like the government
I
trying to track
watched.
down a girl because she can do, she can start fires with her brain.
Right. I watched Red Lights too with Robert De Niro. Anybody see that?
No.
Yeah, that's
No.
worth
No.
seeing. That De Niro makes a pretty good psychic, but they botch the ending. But anyway.
I mean, the other thing, and Richard Saunders talked about this in, publishing the Great Australian Psychic Project results. It's like, what would the world be if people actually had these powers? It would totally different.
Yeah,
I mean, like, you couldn't run casinos, you couldn't run horse races, you couldn't run the
yeah.
stock market because
I wouldn't be
right,
able to do my laundry or eat breakfast or do anything because I'd be constantly barraged with all these vibrations, It's just like, give me a break, folks. Use your heads. It's a
okay.
So,
con.
Next question.
Speaking of using your heads,
Right.
I have to go back and amend my previous question that I just asked you, which came in while we were talking about doing the readings of your book. But it has been brought to my attention that probably what the person who asked the question meant was, do you ever crack up laughing while doing psychic readings, not readings of your book?
Oh,
Yeah.
No, I have total respect for every sitter I sit down with because I know they're coming to me and they've got a broken heart or they've got something that's eating them up. And no, I would never. No,
Oh,
no,
that's good to hear. Yeah.
that would be really, I don't think I would. No, just no.
So
Okay.
I have a question to bounce off
Yes.
of that. I have a friend who is currently involved with a psychic who she believes can contact her dead mother. What is your advice on a basic sting or a method that would reveal them to be fake?
Good idea. That's a very good question. Very good. So here's what she needs to do. She needs to think of 3 things that literally no one in the world but her mother knows. For example, I have 3 things. Susan is the only person in the world who knows what they are. So if you're going to torture somebody, you'll have to get Susan to get them out of her. But no, I told her because she is my partner in this. Okay. So it's just like when Houdini died, he said he was going to take a certain set of coded words to the grave and he was going to send back messages to Beatrice, his wife. It's not quite that corny. But what it is I've set 3 things in my mind that I know that my mother knew. Okay. I don't write them down. I've never written them anywhere. I don't record them anywhere. But when I go into a psychic, if they got any one of those 3 right, then I would change my whole tune. So set yourself 3 goals. Again, it's got to be really personal, super personal. And it can't be just something like, oh, she had a rose garden or she wore a yellow hat. No, it's got to be something deep, something that's maybe from a personal experience when you were a child. And then you just think of that when you're sitting with the psychic. And if they just give you a lot of platitudes and a bunch of bull, then you walk out.
Well, and I
Simple.
think this person is also kind of asking, I have demonstrated already that I apparently can misunderstand people's questions quite a bit, but I'm wondering if this person was also asking, how can they help their family member realize that the person they're talking to is a fake? Like they believe the person, the
Well,
psychic or the medium is
you
fake.
can't convince anybody of anything that they believe in like that. The only thing you can do is say, why don't you try this? And because otherwise you're condescending to them and they may have a very high, that person might be held in really high esteem. So you just say, if that's really true, think of some things that mom and you shared when you were a little girl, and don't give any hints. Just say, I want to get in touch with my mother, and I want her to tell me some things that we shared. Period.
Okay. And don't accept some generic fake platitude, only accept it if
Well,
they're able to produce
you can
a very
accept them, but I
specific thing.
wouldn't go back to that person.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Like we're just planting seeds, y'all. Just plant a seed.
There you go.
Yeah. Like turn on your skeptic brain just for a little bit because it's hard. Like even when I was doing it, I had a genuine belief, that I was tapping into something, and it took time for me to get out of that mindset. But also at the same time, when you have someone in front of you that's talking about something deeply personal to them and they are being emotionally vulnerable, if you have a conscience about you, you don't want to disappoint. Like even like it can be one of those things.
Yeah, but that's when you start stretching the truth.
Right.
You
And
know,
I'm not saying you
you
should do that, but I'm just saying
you
that,
have to want to be able to
yeah.
disappoint.
Yeah. Yes, and that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, well, I think we have time for one more question. Maybe two if it's a real quick answer. Rob, do you have another one that you'd
Yeah,
like
there's a
to
couple
ask?
here. I'm conflicted over which one I should. All right, let's talk about another famous medium that someone asked about. Is Netflix medium Tyler Henry
Oh.
really good at what he does? He had me fooled when I viewed him on Netflix.
What do you want me to say? We've
So
been
for,
after this little squirt for years. He is one of the worst. He doesn't even use good hot reading. He's just a cold reader. And remember, it's a TV show. This whole thing where he shows up at the door and he's standing on the porch and he says, I don't know who this is going to be. I've
right, and
never
it's a
met them.
Cardassian. I don't know
Like,
you.
give me a freaking break. These people dig into they give him a file that he takes home the night before and reads through it. No, he is absolutely, he's what I call, when he first came around, there were a couple of these kind of psychics around. I call them fuzzy sweater psychics. And this is when after pretty much after what's her name? Who was the one who died?
Sylvia Brown.
Yeah, Sylvia Brown. Pretty much Sylvia Brown was the last of the caftan with the jewelry and the whole Romany thing going, and then it switched over and it became the kid next door. It's like, that's why I call him fuzzy sweater psychics. He's like the kid next door. He's the one who bags your groceries at the store. He's innocent. He's young. He's fresh faced. He would never lie to you.
Yeah, another one didn't do as well, and I don't know that her TV series lasted more than one season, but it was a younger person, Monica, the medium. She
Yeah,
had
and
she was
there
a
was Maureen somebody too.
high school student. They followed around with cameras.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just amazing how they say, well, by day she's just a plain high school student,
Yeah,
but at
yeah,
night she talks to the dead. It's like,
yeah.
no, she does not. Please,
Oh,
people, wake up. It's a
and
TV show. You might as well watch Mr. Ed.
What?
So
That horse talked. I saw it.
ooh, that's a whole other conversation about how
I
people
know,
convince
I know.
themselves that horses can
There
do
was no
math.
AI modification of videos back. There wasn't even Photoshop. The horse had to be talking.
Kara,
No,
there
You
are
know how
people
they
that
got the
think
horse
Sphinx
to
can
talk?
talk.
Do you know how they got the horse to talk? Does
I have
anybody know that?
no
the
idea.
horse was very good at understanding human body language and knew when it had answered
No,
correctly.
they
Oh, you
had an
mean on Mr.
electric.
Ed? Sorry, it was peanut butter. But
They had an electric thing in the bit that would shock his mouth so
oh,
that he would
that's
move his
I don't
mouth.
like that. I like the peanut
awful.
butter story better.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Sorry,
that's
folks.
terrible.
The
I thought you
Oh, I
meant
truth
how they
don't.
got
I
the
hurts.
don't
horses
know.
The
to.
truth
Yeah.
hurts. Do you hear me?
Okay. And on that
That
note,
got dark
we
and
are
sad.
gonna wrap up and go to the
Yeah.
hangout. There are quite a few people letting us know in the chat that they have more questions, and we'll get to as many as we can in the hangout. Mark, do you want to stick around with us to hang out?
I want to watch the John Edward thing and see what people say.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll hang
Well,
out for that.
fair enough. Okay, well, let's wrap up and go to the hangout real quick. Thank you everyone for being here, and don't forget to join us next week, same time, same place. Helen, where can people find previous recordings of RfRx?
Yes. So if you want to get more RfRx into your eyeballs and ear holes, go to YouTube. Our latest episode, again, that was done just a couple months ago with Dr. Ben on the separation of church and hospital, is the most recent episode up. Also, as well, if you don't want to look at our mugs, you can go find other clippings and episodes of the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, all the apps. We're on there. So go look for us over there as well. So do that. We like engagement. Leave a review. That's even better. So anyway, So next week, if you want more RfRx, our wonderful friend Stephanie, who a contradiction, who is in this one trouble, is going to be doing what I kind of really wanted her to do, was Mormon fan fiction, which is going to be awesome. And then the following week, right before, which will be, oh my God, let me get dates in front of my face, which will be the 19th, just after Valentine's Day, will be Love is Not a Mystery with David Teachout, who is in competition with Rob for the most RfRx talks.
Oh, it's not a competition. He's got me body slammed to the mat.
Yeah, that is true. You have
It's
to catch
still a
up.
competition. You're just losing.
And then the following week is with our wonderful support group director, Rachel, and she's going to do a talk about the law of attraction. So if anybody was into The Secret or any of that woo-woo stuff, come watch Rachel talk about that. So those are the next three. Those are the next meetings coming up for February. Okay, so moving on, Rob, do you want to tell people where to find us on the socials?
Oh yeah, we're on most of the social medias. Facebook, we're Recovering from Religion on Facebook. There's a Facebook support group, which is RfR Support Groups Project. That's plural, Support Groups Project. We're also on X, as long as that's still here. There we're RfR.org. On Instagram, we're also RfR.org. And on the TikToks, we're at Recovering from Religion.
Yeah. And thank you. Be sure to like, subscribe, anything you want to do. It helps other people find us. And one last note, one of the things that we have also found that really helps people heal sometimes is helping others. And a lot of our volunteers have found a lot of meaning and purpose through volunteering with Recovering from Religion. And all of our services are completely supported by volunteers and donations. And we are always in need of more volunteers to help us out. So if that is something that you're interested in doing, whether it's doing some of those things that we talked about at the beginning, like talking to people on the helplines, or helping moderate on the online community, or helping us edit videos and podcasts to go online, or doing IT work, or whatever the case may be, we probably have a place for you. And if you would like to volunteer with us, check out our website. We have a volunteer page, recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer, where you can fill out an application and see what would be involved in volunteering. And I believe we are still looking as well for web developers. So if that is a skill you have, get in touch with us. We would like to talk with you. Now, we are done. It's time to wrap up. Dr. Daryl Ray, our president and founder, has some closing words for us. Dr. Ray, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Mark. This has been interesting. I don't think I've ever heard actual practitioner tell us from that side. This was fascinating. Good. Yeah. I mean, how rare is it to hear somebody who's actually practiced it? It's got to be pretty rare, because there aren't that many of switch sides, so to speak. Like, anyway, that's the way I look at it. I do have, Rob, I have a plan for you. You could compete with David Teachout. If you just start counting yourself and Susan Gerbuck and Mark and all the other people you seem to be bringing in here from all your, so we could have Rob and his friends against David Teachout.
All right, thank you. That might make it close. It might make it close.
Yeah, yeah, it might. Well, we appreciate Rob's friends, Mark. He never fails to bring us really interesting people with lots of good things to say and interesting experiences. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming here. So just real quick, I just want to remind folks that we got our fundraiser coming up. Helen's leading our fundraising charge on May 3rd and 4th. I know it's still a ways off, but we got to start thinking about these things. And we've got goals to make. So I hope you'll save your pennies so you can donate during the fundraiser. Of course, you can donate now if you want. And there'll be people like Matt Delahunty, Aaron Ra, Seth Andrews are all going to be on there this year. And I'm going to close it out. You were joking before the show, Kara, but I'm serious. That you don't take me seriously sometimes, and that disturbs me. So I'm going to close with a benediction. May the FSM bless you and keep you, and may his godly and goodly appendage touch you consensually. Ramen.
Ramen.
Amen.
Amen.